Hey, I want to dance with somebody.
4, now double here. Chick, 2, 3.
There exists an interesting paradox in the United States. On the one hand, the US is the epicenter of the commercial fitness industry. From Nike to Speedo, Wilson to Lululemon, the US is home to some of the biggest and most lucrative fitness brands in the world. Which makes sense. After all, approximately 80% of Americans, some 247 million people, now engage in some form of physical activity or sports. And the US is home to the most gym members of any nation, with nearly 64.19 million Americans belonging to one gym or another. Yet, on the other hand, it is a place where the people themselves are extremely unfit. With lower life expectancy and higher preventable deaths and high obesity rates, the US also holds the unfortunate top spot as the most unhealthy, wealthy nation on the planet. So what gives? Why does there seem to be such little return on investment when it comes to health and the 45 billion US fitness industry? And could the answer lie in the radically different way that movement is baked into everyday life across the pond in European nations? Well, let's take a look.
Hi there. This is a little something to cool you off.
Pony, come with me.
Did a great job. Don't you feel good? I'll see you next time.
Run.
The commercial fitness market in the United States is enormous. The Health and Fitness Association says that 77 million Americans used fitness facilities in 2024, with almost 25% of Americans age 6 and up holding a gym membership. And on the whole, Americans plan to spend some $60 billion on health and fitness in 2026, cementing exercise as a non-negotiable expense. And of course, this has inevitably led to the model we have today, where pay-to-play experience is embedded in American fitness culture. There are endless gyms, classes, and products that promise to make you fitter, as long as you hand over your credit card. In fact, the average American adult spends approximately $155 per month on health and fitness, which includes gym memberships, supplements, apparel, and personal training, adding up to nearly $1,860 annually per person. For families, of course, these costs can vary widely, with dedicated fitness households easily spending hundreds more per month on multiple memberships, specialized classes, or youth sports. Which, by the way, the average all-in cost for travel youth baseball teams in the US is roughly $6,000 per player per year, covering team fees, uniforms, travel, hotels, and gear. It's insane, but that's kind of another discussion for another day. But it's undeniable. Whether your goal is to slim down or bulk up, you have a plethora of options available to you. Planet Fitness boasts over 20 million members, and its competitor, Anytime Fitness, has over 5,500 locations. But something that also feels very American to me is the ever-present element of extreme intensity that's become extraordinarily popular in the US fitness scene. Americans don't just want yoga or Pilates, they want hot yoga or hot Pilates, where you twist, contort, dip, and lift in temperatures between 95 and 105 degrees Fahrenheit. And of course, we couldn't just lift weights. We need to do it at speed and with questionable technique in a converted lightweight steel garage called CrossFit. And hey, while we're at it, let's time it and make everyone compete against one another with High Rocks, the fastest growing fitness sport in the country. But unfortunately, it still isn't enough. According to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, only 24% of American adults meet the recommended guidelines for both aerobic and muscle strengthening activities. For youth, the situation is equally concerning, as research indicates that less than 25% of American children aged 6 to 17 are getting the recommended 60 minutes of physical activity each day. And bear in mind, only 6 US states, Hawaii, Massachusetts, Mississippi, New York, Vermont, and my home state of Illinois require physical education or PE classes in every grade, K through 12. And this is, I think, the biggest misunderstanding a lot of people, including Americans themselves, have about health, wellness, and fitness in the United States. A single country can have lots of serious exercisers, influencers, supplements, boutique studios, and performance culture, while still having poor average health. And yeah, part of this conversation is one that relates to class and economic opportunity. You can have a small group which is extremely optimized, gyms, macros, wearables, all things that cost a considerable amount of money. But so long as the larger group is dealing with long commutes, poor food access, less healthcare, and an inequitable work-life balance, well, fitness and health will be luxuries that many just simply can't afford. And remember, population health is driven less by what the top 10 or 20% do, and much more by what the median person does every single day, which is considerably different across the pond. And now listen, on paper it doesn't 100% make sense. According to the WHO, Europeans on the whole drink more alcohol, smoke more cigarettes, consume more smoked meats, and are less likely to go to the gym than Americans. Heck, I live in Germany, which, I love you guys, but this is basically the heart of brown food. Schnitzel, Spätzle, Kartoffelsalat, Wurst, Bier, Brezel. They call this a salad, for goodness sakes. But you know what? The obesity rate in the US is still double that of Germany's. What gives? Well, certainly access to universal healthcare is a key component here. Americans are far more likely to forego preventative care than Europeans because cost is such a significant factor. Diet is also a key component. Americans consume far more ultra-processed foods in greater portion sizes as well. And yes, absolutely, this varies from country to country. But Europeans also have better vacation time, better sick leave policies, and better work-life balance, which means they are more resilient and don't see the same levels of fatigue and burnout that can manifest in stress-related illnesses. By the way, if you're interested in learning a bit more about these, I have covered all three of these topics extensively on my channel, so I encourage you to check them out. I'll link a few down in the description below on this video. But I do think a major factor is just that we simply have a very different approach to exercise here in Europe. On the whole, Europeans tend to get a lot more exercise by spending time outside. Rather than working out in a gym, many people in Europe, especially in Scandinavia, France, and Germany, will go for walks, bike, go swimming, hike, or find other ways to get some exercise in fresh air. And yeah, as the saying goes, there's no such thing as poor weather, only poor clothing choices. And fun fact, surveys show that Icelanders and Norwegians are the Europeans that exercise the most, which is notable because these are also two of the coldest countries. So it could just be that exercise is a good way to keep warm, but climate and weather is definitely not a barrier to getting in a good workout. But beyond pure exercise for exercise's sake, movement is also baked into everyday life as a way to commute from one place to another, to build community or to connect with nature. In EU cities, short trips are far more likely to include walking and public transport. An EU mobility study found that in European cities, 54% of short distance trips are by private car, and about 27% by walking. In contrast, a 2024 commuting analysis reported that in the US and Canada, nearly 92% of commutes are by car, with only 3.5% by active mobility. And now, an older but still widely cited international transport research report found that Europeans walked about 382 kilometers per person per year versus 140 in the US, and bicycled 188 kilometers versus 40 in the US. And that matters because 30 to 60 minutes of extra daily movement from commuting, errands, and stairs can affect weight, blood sugar, blood pressure, and cardiovascular risk far more consistently than just a few intense gym sessions per week, surrounded by an otherwise sedentary lifestyle. But while we're on the subject of small changes that can make a big impact, I want to talk to you about a small change that I made that has transformed my safety and security. And rather than tell you, I'd like to show you. Try Googling yourself real quick. Full name, city, and state. You'll be shocked at how many sites publicly share your private information. Creepy, right? Well, whether you're just privacy conscious or just don't like the idea of anyone anywhere finding where you live or where you work, it just makes sense to take advantage of a service that keeps this information private, which is why I use the tools from the sponsor of today's video, Incogni. Incogni tracks down and removes your personal data from multiple sites, including online directories, people search sites, and even commercial databases. And I don't have to do anything. They do all of the legwork. Just sign up and give them permission to act on your behalf. And then they go out and find the list that you were on and demand that you be taken off. Plus, if you sign up for their unlimited plan, you have access to their custom removal feature to take down almost anything that is exposed about you online. Simply point them to where your data is being exposed and their privacy experts will handle the rest. While it may seem that taking your personal data back is challenging, their custom removal feature makes it effortless for you. Just give Incogni the link to a website that's sharing your information and watch it disappear in real time. And you know, they can't harm you if they can't find you. So use the code Ashton at the link below and get 60% off an annual plan at incogni.com/Ashton. Plus, many nations in Europe, including Germany, Switzerland, Austria, and Norway, have a very strong Verein, or club culture. A cornerstone of social life, these voluntary associations or clubs are formed around a shared interest. Anything from sports and music to gardening, shooting, or volunteer firefighting. Here in Germany, there are over 600,000 registered associations, and many are tied to specific towns or neighborhoods and can exist for decades or even centuries. They often act as a social backbone of smaller communities. But specific to sports, unlike more commercialized or individual fitness cultures, Verein emphasizes regular participation, routine, and community rather than peak performance. Instead of going to the gym, many Germans grow up playing sports or participating in groups through their local club, often for years. Plus, membership fees are usually modest, making activities like sports accessible to a wide population, including children. And this is exactly the same as in Norway, where their philosophy of joy of sport for all treats youth sports as a public good, focusing on inclusivity, fun, and affordability rather than early specialization or winning. By prohibiting scorekeeping until the age of 13, banning national rankings for children, and utilizing high volunteer rates, Norway keeps the costs low, often less than $1,000 a year, and boasts an astounding 95% participation rate, which might just be a strong retort against the hyper-competitive travel sports that many American kids are enrolled in. After all, Norway dominated the 2026 Winter Olympics, setting a record with 18 gold medals. Yeah, that's right. Even though it has fewer people than the state of Colorado, it won more total medals than any other country. Now, you might reasonably argue here, okay, Ashton, Germany, Switzerland, Austria, Norway, yeah. They aren't representative of the entirety of Europe. And you're right. The countries I just mentioned are on the very healthier side of European nations when you look across the continent. Northern Central Europe, mainly Germany, the Netherlands, and Scandinavia, typically do see lower rates of obesity in comparison to Southern and Eastern Europe. However, that being said, the US is still an outlier when it comes to adult and childhood obesity rates. Plus, the US is consistently high across most regions, whereas here in the EU it is highly variable depending on the country. But all in all, obesity rates in the US are about 50 to 70% higher than here in Europe. So perhaps, maybe unsurprisingly, the US has begun turning to the pharmaceutical industry for help. Which leads me to my next point. One of the biggest trends currently in health and fitness in the US doesn't have anything to do with gym or a sport, but rather the growing popularity and ease of access to GLP-1 medications. Driven by direct-to-consumer marketing, higher obesity rates, and greater availability, approximately 1 in 8 US adults have tried GLP-1s, which is vastly higher than here in Europe. In fact, just since January of this year, more than 600,000 prescriptions have been written for Novo Nordisk's new Wegovy pill, per company reports. Now, social media and advertising sometimes create the impression that GLP-1 medications are a quick fix. But make no mistake, obesity is a complex, chronic, progressive disease that requires ongoing medical management. The GLP-1 drugs work by targeting hormones in the gut and brain that slow digestion and target appetite and feelings of fullness. This can, and often does, make it easier to adopt healthier habits like eating less and moving more. But bear in mind, health is so much more than just how much you eat. It's what you eat, how much you move your body, and what your blood sugar is, what your blood pressure is, what's your cholesterol, and how often can you access preventative care, management of stress, and sleep. All of these vast variety of things are really important. And yeah, although medication can and does help some individuals lose weight, obesity is not a simple disease of inactivity or overeating. I think we need to tread carefully here, because while these medications can and have been life-saving for many, if we can't tackle the systemic and cultural barriers to fitness and mobility, then we aren't actually any healthier of a society, even if that number on the scale goes down. And I think when you look across European nations, even with the differences in obesity rates, we see that there are a myriad of factors which contribute to lower levels of obesity and higher levels of activity, including socioeconomic status, mental health, stress, and environmental influences. There needs to be a societal tackling of the obesogenic environment that we've managed to create in the last 30 to 40 years. If you're getting to that point where literally anyone and everyone with obesity, and perhaps at the more upper overweight spectrum, is on the drug, you're still going to lose that focus. The goal should be investing millions into mitigating the issue before it presents itself, not fixing the problem after the fact. Because make no mistake, even at a young age, before this fitness culture really kicks in, the US already has worse health outcomes. Childhood obesity rates in the USA are still increasing, reaching record highs according to recent data. Between 2021 and 2023, approximately 21.1% of children and teens aged 2 to 19 were obese, up from 19.3% in 2017 to 2018, marking a continued upward trend over the past 3 decades. To put these numbers another way, 1 in 5 American youth are obese, and 1 in 3 are categorized as living with excess weight. In comparison to here in the EU, those numbers are slashed in half, with just 1 in 10 being categorized as obese and 1 in 4 as overweight. Now, to be fair here, the EU is also seeing increasing numbers as well, but these numbers are still a fraction of those in the United States. And I have to stress it again. Yes, of course, there are many systems here which are at play that all lead to this result. But it is notable because Europeans don't necessarily exercise more intensely than the US. Instead, Europeans just move more consistently across their entire lives. And that consistency shows up at the bookends of life, with greater health outcomes for those in childhood and decades later with more healthy years after 65. Now, this is all anecdotal and observational, but when I'm walking around my village in the Black Forest, day in and day out, I see far more adults over 65, over 80 to be honest, that are leading much more active and independent lives than those in the United States. Elderly persons cycling to their social activities or walking with their shopping trolley to the grocery store and back. You know, it's really sad, but in the US, losing your driver's license is functionally the end of your autonomy. But it isn't here. And I do think that is a big part of the reason why Americans spend more years living with disease and disability than their peers, which leads to the US having a larger gap between lifespan and health span. Health in old age is built by decades of small daily movements, not just workouts. And yet, for many Americans, exercise is something you schedule. It's an activity that you pencil into your calendar. Fitness is something you go do somewhere else. But in Europe, movement is something you live. You know, when I was working through the research and constructing the outline for this video, I was talking to my husband about how our lives and routines have changed when it comes to fitness since moving here to Germany. And one thing he said that really stuck out to me was that he's noticed how vastly different cycling is and how infrastructure is an invisible barrier to the sport. In many parts of the US, if you want to go ride your bike, you have to first go put your bike rack on the back of your car, load up your bike and your accessories, drive to a trailhead, and then you ride your bike. But in Germany, we just ride straight from our house because we have safe infrastructure, which is huge. It means that if you wanted to go out and bike the same distance or exercise for the same amount of time on that bicycle, you might actually need to spend an hour more of your day because you have to handle all of the extra logistics and drive there and back. And let's all be honest here. We all know how poor US work-life balance is. It's an extra hour that most Americans just don't have. But again, being fit and prioritizing fitness isn't necessarily about checking off a box when you complete your daily class, but making choices throughout the day that prioritize physical and mental well-being. Walking or biking to work, the grocery store, or to appointments because we have the infrastructure, access to green space and parks right outside your door. But that priority is vastly more difficult to achieve in the US than in most European nations because of the way we've designed our cities, schedules, and the way we raise our kids and live independently into retirement. And, you know, at the end of the day, I find myself wondering how different and much more healthy Americans would be if we shifted our fitness mindset and invested a fraction of the money we spend on fitness and wellness into just better public pedestrian infrastructure, increasing time off, and improving work-life balance. Another way to think about it, rather than working more for a higher paycheck so we can afford more expensive healthcare and fitness subscriptions, wouldn't it be more prudent to front-load that investment? These are actually the questions that I would like to leave you with at the end of this video. So please let me know down below in the comment section. And as always, if you enjoyed what you saw today, be sure to hit that thumbs up button. And for more content from Type Ashton, hit that subscribe button. So I'll see you next time. Tschüss!